The sun was setting over the quiet countryside, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The air smelled faintly of freshly cut grass, and a gentle breeze rustled through the tall trees lining the narrow road. Clara Bennett tightened her scarf around her neck as she walked briskly down the path leading to her small cottage. It had been another uneventful day at the library, helping children find books, organizing shelves, and chatting with elderly patrons about their favorite novels. Life in this sleepy little town moved slowly, almost predictably, but Clara didn't mind. She liked the simplicity of it all. As she approached the bend near Miller's farm, something unusual caught her eye. A sleek black car sat parked awkwardly on the side of the road, its hazard lights blinking like fireflies trapped in jars. Steam billowed out from under the raised hood, curling into the cool evening air. Standing beside the vehicle was a man dressed in an expensive-looking suit, his polished shoes now scuffed with dirt. He looked completely out of place against the rustic backdrop of farmland and wildflowers. Clara slowed her pace, curiosity tugging at her. Normally she wouldn't have stopped, but there was something about the way the man stood, hands on his hips, brow furrowed in frustration, that made her pause. Taking a deep breath, she called out, "Everything all right?" The man turned sharply, startled by her voice. His expression softened when he saw her approach. "Oh, hi," he said, running a hand through his dark hair. "I'm afraid my car decided to give up on me right here." He gestured toward the smoking engine, not exactly sure what happened. Clara nodded knowingly. Cars breaking down wasn't uncommon in these parts, especially with the rough terrain and unpredictable weather. "Mind if I take a look?" she asked, stepping closer. He hesitated for a moment, clearly unsure whether to trust a stranger poking around his luxury vehicle. But then again, they were miles away from any mechanic or service station, and the nearest town was at least 20 minutes away by foot. Finally, he shrugged. "Sure, why not? Can't hurt, I guess." Clara smiled warmly before leaning over the engine compartment. Though she wasn't a professional mechanic, she'd grown up watching her late father tinker with old cars in their garage. He'd taught her enough basics to diagnose common problems even if she couldn't fix everything herself. After a few moments of inspection, she spotted the issue: a loose radiator hose that had come undone, causing coolant to leak out. "It's not too bad," she announced confidently, turning back to the man. "Just need to reconnect this hose and add some water. Should get you moving again." Relief washed over his face. "Really? That's great news. Thank you so much." He extended his hand. "By the way, I'm Adrian Caldwell." "Clara Bennett," she replied, shaking his hand firmly. There was something oddly comforting about the way he introduced himself, polite yet genuine, despite his obvious wealth and sophistication. Together, they worked quickly to repair the car. Adrian handed tools while Clara focused on fixing the hose, their teamwork surprisingly seamless. As they labored, snippets of conversation filled the silence. Adrian explained how he'd taken a wrong turn during a weekend getaway, trying to escape the chaos of city life. Clara shared stories about growing up in the area, describing the charm and quirks of her hometown. Despite their vastly different backgrounds, they found common ground in their mutual appreciation for simplicity and hard work. Once the repair was complete, Clara stepped back, wiping her hands on a rag she'd pulled from her bag. "That should do it," she said with satisfaction. "Just drive carefully until you reach a proper mechanic." Adrian nodded gratefully. "You saved me a lot of trouble. Honestly, I don't know what I would have done without your help." "It's no big deal," Clara replied modestly. "Happens more often than you'd think around here." As Adrian prepared to leave, he glanced down at Clara's hands, which were still holding the rag. Something glinted on her left ring finger, a gold band with intricate engravings. For a split second, his heart skipped a beat. The design looked eerily familiar, stirring memories of family heirlooms and whispered tales of scandal. But before he could say anything, Clara tucked her hands into her coat pockets, breaking his line of sight. "Well, thank you again," Adrian said, climbing back into his car. "If you're ever in the city, let me know. I'd love to repay the favor somehow." Clara chuckled softly. "I'll keep that in mind. Safe travels, Mr. Caldwell." With a final wave, Adrian drove off, leaving Clara standing alone on the quiet country road. She watched until the taillights disappeared into the distance, unaware of the questions swirling in Adrian's mind, or the role that simple gold ring would soon play in both their lives. Adrian Caldwell gripped the steering wheel tightly as his luxury car purred smoothly along the winding country roads. The engine hummed beneath him, a stark contrast to the chaos it had caused just moments ago. Though he was finally back on track, his mind wasn't focused on the road ahead. It kept drifting back to Clara Bennett. Her calm demeanor, her practical hands fixing his car with ease, and most of all, that ring on her finger. It gnawed at him like an unsolved puzzle. The more he replayed their brief encounter in his mind, the clearer one detail became: the ring. He couldn't shake the feeling that he'd seen its design before. The engravings weren't random. They were deliberate, intricate, almost regal. They reminded him of something deeply personal, though he couldn't quite place it. His family's crest bore similar patterns, passed down through generations as a symbol of their lineage. But how could someone like Clara, a woman who seemed so unassuming, possess such a thing? By the time Adrian reached the small hotel where he was staying for the night, curiosity had taken hold of him completely. After checking into his room, he unpacked his laptop and began digging through old family records stored digitally. As a wealthy entrepreneur, Adrian prided himself on being meticulous, especially when it came to preserving his family's history. Over the years, he'd scanned countless documents, photographs, and artifacts, creating a private archive accessible only to him. Hours passed as Adrian scrolled through files, searching for anything related to rings or heirlooms. At first, nothing stood out. Then, buried deep within a folder labeled Ancestral Artifacts, he found what he was looking for. A high-resolution image of a gold band identical to the one Clara wore stared back at him from the screen. Beneath it was a caption: Caldwell Family Crest Ring, lost during Gerald Caldwell's era, circa 1950s. Gerald Caldwell, Adrian's grandfather. The name sent a chill down his spine. Stories about his grandfather were few and far between, but the ones Adrian did know hinted at scandal. Rumors spoke of forbidden love, betrayal, and a mysterious woman who vanished without a trace. No one in the family ever confirmed these tales, dismissing them as gossip. Yet here was proof. The very ring tied to those whispers now rested on Clara's finger. Adrian leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. What were the odds? Was this some bizarre coincidence, or was there more to Clara than met the eye? He tried to piece together the fragments of information he had. If the ring truly belonged to his family, how had it ended up with her, and why did she wear it so casually, as if it were just another piece of jewelry? Unable to let go of the mystery, Adrian decided to return to the small town the next day. He told himself it was purely out of curiosity, but deep down, he knew there was something else drawing him back. Clara intrigued him, not just because of the ring, but because of who she was. There was a quiet strength about her, a simplicity that felt rare in today's fast-paced world. She didn't seem impressed by his wealth or status, which made her stand out even more. When morning arrived, Adrian drove back to the countryside, parking near the library where Clara worked. From the outside, the building looked quaint, its red brick walls covered in ivy. Children played in the yard nearby, laughing as they chased each other around. Inside, the air smelled faintly of paper and ink, a comforting aroma that transported Adrian back to his childhood days spent reading adventure novels. Clara was seated behind the front desk, engrossed in a book. She looked up when she heard the door chime and smiled slightly upon seeing him. "Mr. Caldwell," she said, closing her book. "What brings you back?" Adrian hesitated, unsure how to explain his presence without sounding intrusive. "I thought I'd explore the area a bit more," he replied smoothly. "And maybe thank you again for your help yesterday." "Well, you're welcome," Clara said warmly, though her tone carried a hint of caution. "It's not every day we get visitors like you around here." Her words sparked an idea in Adrian's mind. Perhaps the best way to learn more about her and the ring was to spend time in her world. He began visiting the library regularly, always finding excuses to strike up conversations with Clara. Sometimes he asked for book recommendations. Other times he shared stories about his travels. Clara, polite as ever, engaged with him but remained guarded. Whenever the topic veered toward her personal life, she skillfully redirected the conversation. Despite her evasiveness, Adrian noticed subtle clues about her personality. She had a sharp wit hidden beneath her reserved exterior and a genuine passion for helping others. Watching her interact with patrons, he saw how much the community relied on her. She wasn't just a librarian. She was a cornerstone of the town, someone people trusted and admired. Yet the question of the ring lingered in the back of his mind. One afternoon, unable to resist any longer, Adrian broached the subject indirectly. "You know," he said, casually flipping through a book on local history, "I've always been fascinated by heirlooms, things that carry stories across generations." Clara paused, her fingers hovering over a stack of returned books. For a split second, Adrian thought he saw a flicker of unease cross her face. "Heirlooms can be special," she agreed carefully, "but sometimes they come with baggage too." "What do you mean?" Adrian pressed gently. She shrugged, avoiding his gaze. "People cling to objects hoping they'll preserve memories. But memories are fragile. Objects, well, they don't always tell the whole story." Her words struck a chord with Adrian. He realized then that whatever connection Clara had to the ring, it meant something deeply personal to her. Pushing further might alienate her, and he didn't want that. Instead, he resolved to bide his time, continuing to build trust while discreetly gathering more information. That evening, after leaving the library, Adrian hired a private investigator to look into Clara's background. It wasn't something he was proud of. He valued honesty above all else. But desperation clouded his judgment. He needed answers, and waiting patiently no longer seemed like an option. Days turned into weeks as Adrian juggled his visits to the library with updates from the investigator. The reports trickled in slowly, revealing fragments of Clara's past. Her mother, Margaret Bennett, had lived in the same region as Adrian's grandfather during the 1950s. Beyond that, details were scarce. No direct links between Clara's family and the Caldwells emerged, but the timing was too coincidental to ignore. Each new revelation only deepened Adrian's curiosity. He found himself torn between two desires: uncovering the truth about the ring and getting to know Clara for who she truly was. In her presence, he felt a sense of peace he hadn't experienced in years. She challenged him to see beyond material possessions, reminding him of the beauty and simplicity in human connection. As the sun set over the countryside once again, casting long shadows across the fields, Adrian sat in his car outside the library. He watched Clara lock up for the evening, her figure silhouetted against the golden light. For the first time in his life, he questioned whether knowing the full truth mattered more than simply enjoying the moment. Whatever secrets lay hidden, behind that ring, one thing was certain: Clara Bennett had already begun to change his life in ways he never expected. Adrian's visits to the library became a regular part of his routine. Each day he found new reasons to linger longer, whether it was borrowing books he didn't really need or asking Clara for advice on obscure topics. To outsiders, he might have seemed like just another curious visitor, but inside, Adrian was wrestling with a storm of emotions. The ring weighed heavily on his mind, its presence both intriguing and unsettling. He couldn't stop thinking about how something so deeply tied to his family's history had ended up in Clara's possession. Clara, for her part, remained polite but reserved. She answered his questions thoughtfully and shared stories about the town when prompted, but there was always a subtle distance between them, a barrier she kept firmly in place. Adrian noticed it, of course, but instead of pushing harder, he decided to take a step back. He realized that if he wanted to earn her trust, he needed to approach her world with sincerity rather than suspicion. One afternoon, as rain pattered softly against the library windows, Adrian arrived carrying a thermos of coffee. I figured you could use a break, he said with a smile, setting the thermos on the counter. Clara looked up from shelving books, surprised by the gesture. That's very kind of you, she replied, accepting a cup gratefully. Though, I'm not sure why you're being so nice to someone who spends most of her time surrounded by dusty old books. Adrian chuckled. Maybe because those dusty old books hold some of the best stories. Their conversation flowed easily after that. Shifting from literature to childhood memories, Clara spoke fondly of growing up in the countryside, describing summers spent exploring forests and winters curled up by the fireplace with her grandmother's favorite novels. Adrian listened intently, captivated not just by her words but by the warmth in her voice. It was clear that her roots ran deep in this place, anchoring her to a life vastly different from his own. But even as they grew closer, Adrian couldn't ignore the nagging question at the back of his mind. Every time he saw the ring glinting on her finger, it felt like a silent reminder of the mystery connecting them. He knew he couldn't keep dancing around the topic forever. Sooner or later, he would have to confront it head-on. The private investigators' reports continued to trickle in, painting a fragmented picture of Clara's past. One detail stood out. Her grandmother, Evelyn Harper, had lived in the same small town during the 1950s, a period coinciding with the scandal surrounding Adrian's grandfather, Gerald Caldwell. According to local records, Evelyn had been known as a talented seamstress, often working for wealthy families in nearby cities. Her name appeared briefly in newspaper clippings alongside mentions of high society events, though nothing concrete linked her directly to the Caldwells. Still, the parallels were impossible to ignore. Adrian began piecing together a theory. Perhaps Evelyn and Gerald had crossed paths during one of these events, sparking a relationship that society deemed inappropriate. If true, it would explain how the ring had ended up in Clara's family. But without definitive proof, it remained speculation, and Adrian wasn't ready to accuse anyone based on guesses alone. Determined to learn more, Adrian decided to dig deeper into his own family archives. Late one night, sitting in his hotel room surrounded by stacks of old documents, he stumbled upon a collection of letters written by his grandfather. Most were mundane, business correspondence, invitations to social gatherings, but tucked away, in the corner of a drawer was an envelope marked personal. Inside, Adrian found a series of handwritten notes addressed to someone named E. The letters were filled with longing and regret, their tone achingly intimate. "Dearest E," one began, "I fear our time together grows shorter with each passing day. The weight of my responsibilities pulls me away, yet my heart remains steadfastly yours." Another read, "If only we could rewrite the rules that bind us. Know that you are never far from my thoughts." Adrian's hands trembled as he read through the pages. For the first time, he glimpsed the man behind the polished facade, the vulnerable, conflicted soul who had loved deeply but lost everything because of societal expectations. And now, decades later, the legacy of that love sat on Clara's finger, a symbol of resilience passed down through generations. Armed with this newfound knowledge, Adrian returned to the library the next morning, his resolve stronger than ever. This time, he wouldn't skirt around the issue. He owed it to himself and to Clara to understand the truth. When he walked in, Clara greeted him with her usual warm smile. "Back again?" she teased lightly. "You're starting to make me think you enjoy libraries more than business meetings." "I do," Adrian admitted, surprising even himself with the honesty in his voice. "There's something comforting about stories, isn't there? They connect us to people and places we might otherwise never know." Clara nodded, her expression thoughtful. "Stories have a way of shaping who we are. Sometimes they're all we have left of someone." Her words struck a chord with Adrian. Taking a deep breath, he decided it was time. "Clara, can I ask you something personal?" he began, his tone cautious but earnest. "That ring you wear, it's beautiful. Does it have a story behind it?" For a moment, Clara froze, her fingers instinctively brushing against the band on her finger. Her eyes searched his face, as if trying to gauge his intentions. Finally, she sighed softly. "It does," she admitted. "But it's complicated." "Adrian, leaned forward slightly, giving her space to speak, or not. "You don't have to tell me anything you're uncomfortable with," he assured her. "I'm just curious. It reminds me of something from my family's past." Clara hesitated, then nodded slowly. "My grandmother gave it to me before she passed away. She said it came from a man she loved dearly, though circumstances forced them apart. She never told me his name, only that he was kind and brave and willing to defy the world for her. The ring was her most prized possession, and she wanted me to have it as a reminder that love endures, even when life tries to tear it apart." Her voice wavered slightly as she spoke, revealing the depth of emotion tied to the ring. Adrian felt a lump rise in his throat. Here was a woman carrying a piece of his family's history, unaware of the connection until now. Yet instead of feeling anger or betrayal, he felt awe. The ring wasn't just an object. It was a testament to the power of love and sacrifice. "Clara," Adrian said gently, "what if I told you I think I know who that man was?" Her eyes widened in shock. "What do you mean?" He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "My grandfather, Gerald Caldwell, was involved in a scandal decades ago. Rumor suggested he fell in love with someone outside the family, someone society wouldn't approve of. I recently found letters he wrote to a woman named E. They match the timeline of your grandmother's life." Clara stared at him, disbelief etched across her features. "Are you saying—" "I'm saying it's possible," Adrian finished. "Possible that your grandmother and my grandfather shared a love so profound it survived even separation, and that ring, it's part of their story." Silence hung between them, heavy with unspoken emotions. Clara's hand moved to cover the ring, as if shielding it from scrutiny. After what felt like an eternity, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I want to understand," Adrian replied honestly. "Not just the ring, but you. You've intrigued me from the moment I met you, Clara. This isn't about reclaiming something that belongs to my family. It's about honoring the bond that brought us here." Tears welled up in Clara's eyes, but she blinked them away quickly. "I don't know what to say," she admitted. "All these years I thought the ring was just a family heirloom. Now knowing it carries such a history, it changes everything." "It doesn't have to change anything," Adrian said softly. "We can choose how we move forward. Together." As the rain continued to patter against the windows, the two of them sat in silence, united by a story that spanned generations. Whatever lay ahead, Adrian knew one thing for certain: the journey had only just begun. The revelation hung heavy in the air, like storm clouds before a downpour. Clara sat motionless, her fingers tracing the edges of the ring as if trying to feel its history beneath her skin. Adrian watched her carefully, unsure whether he had crossed a line or opened a door that should have remained closed. The library around them was quiet, save for the distant rustle of pages turning and the soft patter of rain against the windows. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, Clara broke the silence. "I need time," she said softly, her voice steady but tinged with emotion. It's a lot to process." Adrian nodded immediately, understanding completely. "Of course," he replied. "Take all the time you need. I didn't mean to overwhelm you. I just wanted to share what I'd discovered." Clara looked at him then, her gaze searching his face for something, reassurance perhaps, or sincerity. Whatever she found seemed to calm her slightly. She gave him a small, grateful smile. "Thank you for telling me. It's not every day someone comes into your life and turns everything upside down." Her words carried a weight Adrian hadn't anticipated. He realized how much trust she was placing in him by even considering his story. "I don't want to complicate things for you," he said earnestly, "but I also can't ignore the connection between us, or the fact that this ring ties our families together in ways neither of us could have imagined." Clara nodded slowly, her mind clearly racing. "It's strange," she murmured. "All my life I thought the ring was just a keepsake from my grandmother, a reminder of her strength and love. Now knowing it might belong to your family too, it makes me wonder about her. About them. Did they suffer? Were they happy, even for a little while? Adrian leaned forward, his expression compassionate. From the letters I read, I think they were deeply in love, but their circumstances made it impossible for them to stay together. My grandfather wrote about longing and regret, about wishing he could rewrite the rules that kept them apart. If anything, I think the ring symbolizes hope, that love can endure, even when the world tries to tear it apart. Clara's eyes glistened with unshed tears. Hope, she repeated softly. That's a beautiful way to look at it. Over the next few days, Adrian gave Clara space, resisting the urge to bombard her with questions or explanations. Instead, he focused on learning more about her world, the town she called home, the people she cared for, and the values she held dear. He spent hours wandering through the countryside, marveling at its simplicity and charm. It was so different from the fast-paced, high-stakes environment he was accustomed to in the city. Here, life moved at a slower pace and relationships mattered more than possessions. During one of these walks, Adrian stumbled upon an old antique shop tucked away on a quiet street. Curious, he stepped inside, greeted by the scent of polished wood and aged paper. The shopkeeper, an elderly man named Mr. Hargrove, welcomed him warmly. As Adrian browsed the shelves filled with trinkets and relics, he struck up a conversation with Mr. Hargrove, who turned out to be a wealth of local knowledge. Ever heard of Evelyn Harper? Adrian asked casually, testing the waters. Mr. Hargrove's eyes lit up. Oh yes. Everyone knew Evelyn back in the day. She was quite the talented seamstress, worked for some of the fanciest folks in the region. Always kept to herself, though. Never married. Never had children until later in life. People used to speculate about her past, but she never said much. Adrian listened intently, piecing together fragments of Clara's grandmother's life. Do you know if she ever mentioned anyone special? Someone important to her? The old man scratched his chin thoughtfully. Now that you mention it, there were rumors. Folks said she fell in love with a man from the city, a wealthy fellow who couldn't marry her because of societal pressures. Some claimed he gave her a gift before they parted ways, something valuable, but no one ever saw it or knew for sure. Adrian felt a chill run down his spine. Could the gift have been the ring? It seemed likely. Yet hearing these whispers only deepened his admiration for Clara's grandmother and for Clara herself. They were part of a legacy shaped by courage and resilience, qualities he now saw reflected in her every action. When Adrian returned to the library later that week, Clara greeted him with a tentative smile. I've been thinking, she said, leading him to a quiet corner where they wouldn't be overheard, about what you told me and about the ring. Adrian's heart skipped a beat. And? I'd like to learn more, she admitted. Not just about the ring, but about your family, about our families. If this story is true, if my grandmother and your grandfather really loved each other, then it feels like we owe it to them to uncover the truth. Relief washed over Adrian. He had feared she might shut him out entirely, but instead, she was willing to explore the mystery alongside him. I'd like that too, he said. Where do you want to start? Clara hesitated, then reached into her bag and pulled out a small wooden box. Opening it, she revealed a stack of faded letters tied together with a ribbon. These belong to my grandmother, she explained. She left them to me along with the ring. I've never read them. I didn't think they were meant for me. But maybe they'll help us understand. Adrian's eyes widened. You kept them all this time? She nodded. They felt important even if I didn't know why. Do you think they'll tell us something? They might, Adrian replied, his voice filled with anticipation. Let's go through them together. For hours they pored over the letters, their content both heartbreaking and hopeful. Written in elegant cursive, they chronicled Evelyn's secret relationship with Gerald Caldwell. Their love had blossomed during stolen moments. A chance meeting, at a charity gala, late-night conversations under the stars, promises whispered in hushed tones. But the letters also revealed the pain of their separation, forced apart by family obligations and societal expectations. One passage stood out to Adrian. Though we cannot be together, know that my heart will always belong to you. This ring is a token of my devotion, a reminder that love transcends barriers. Keep it close, for it carries a piece of me. Clara's hands trembled as she read the words aloud. She gave up so much for him, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. And yet, she never stopped loving him. Adrian reached out, gently covering her hand with his own. Neither did he said softly. The letters I found prove that. They both carried the memory of each other for the rest of their lives. A long silence followed, broken only by the sound of rain tapping against the window. Finally, Clara looked up at him, her eyes shining with determination. We have to finish this, she said firmly. For them. For us. Adrian smiled, feeling a sense of purpose settle over him. Then let's do it. Together. As the days turned into weeks, Adrian and Clara delved deeper into their shared history. They visited archives, interviewed townsfolk, and pieced together fragments of a story that spanned generations. Along the way, their bond grew stronger, built on mutual respect and a shared desire to honor the past. Through it all, the ring remained a constant presence, a symbol of love that endured despite adversity. It wasn't just an heirloom anymore. It was a bridge connecting two worlds, uniting the past with the present. And as Adrian and Clara stood side by side, unraveling the threads of their intertwined destinies, they began to realize that their journey was about more than uncovering secrets. It was about finding meaning and perhaps a future worth building together. As Adrian and Clara delved deeper into the story of Evelyn Harper and Gerald Caldwell, their connection to each other grew stronger. What had started as a chance encounter on a quiet country road had blossomed into something neither of them could have predicted, a shared mission to uncover the truth about their intertwined histories. But it wasn't just the mystery that bound them, it was the way they complemented each other, filling gaps in their lives they hadn't even realized existed. One crisp autumn morning, Adrian arrived at Clara's doorstep with an invitation. I think it's time you saw where this all began, he said, holding out a small brochure. It featured a photograph of his family estate, a sprawling mansion surrounded by manicured gardens and towering oak trees. Come visit my home. There are artifacts there, old photographs, documents, personal belongings, that might help us piece together more of the puzzle. Clara hesitated, her fingers brushing against the edge of the brochure. She had never ventured far beyond her small town, let alone stepped foot into the world of luxury Adrian inhabited. The idea felt daunting, almost surreal, yet something in his earnest expression reassured her. Are you sure? She asked quietly. Won't it be strange? Me being there? Adrian shook his head firmly. Not at all. You're part of this story too, Clara. My family owes you answers as much as I do. After a moment of consideration, Clara nodded. All right. When do we leave? The journey to Adrian's estate was unlike anything Clara had ever experienced. They drove through winding roads lined with golden fields and rolling hills, eventually reaching a gated entrance flanked by stone pillars engraved with the Caldwell crest, the same design etched onto her ring. As they passed through, Clara couldn't help but feel a mix of awe and unease. The estate was breathtakingly beautiful, but its grandeur also highlighted the stark differences between their worlds. Adrian noticed her quiet demeanor and reached over to place a reassuring hand on hers. You don't have to feel out of place here, he said gently. This is your history too, remember? Clara managed a small smile. It's hard not to feel overwhelmed. Everything here feels so permanent, like it's been standing for centuries. That's because it has, Adrian replied with a chuckle. But permanence doesn't mean perfection. Every brick, every room, it holds stories, both good and bad. And some of those stories belong to you. Upon arriving, Adrian introduced Clara to Mrs. Whitaker, the estate's longtime housekeeper, who greeted her warmly despite her initial nervousness. Together they explored the vast halls filled with portraits of Caldwell ancestors, their stern faces staring down from gilded frames. Clara paused in front of one painting in particular, a man with sharp features and piercing eyes. "Is that him?" she asked, pointing to the portrait. Adrian nodded. "Yes, that's my grandfather, Gerald Caldwell." Clara studied the image, intently, searching for traces of the man described in the letters. Gone was the vulnerability and longing captured in his words. Instead, she saw authority and pride. "He looks so different from how I imagined him," she murmured. "That's because this is how the world saw him," Adrian explained. "But behind closed doors he was someone else entirely, someone capable of love and heartbreak." Over the next few days, Adrian guided Clara through the estate's archives, unveiling treasures hidden away for decades. They found old photographs of Evelyn Harper, taken during events where she worked as a seamstress. In one picture, she stood near Gerald, her gaze soft yet guarded, as if aware of the camera capturing a forbidden moment. There were also journals belonging to Gerald, detailing his struggles with duty versus desire. Each discovery brought them closer to understanding the depth of their grandparents' bond and the sacrifices it demanded. One evening, as twilight bathed the estate in hues of amber and violet, Adrian led Clara to the library, a room larger than any she'd ever seen. Shelves stretched from floor to ceiling, filled with leather-bound books and fragile manuscripts. At the center of the room sat a mahogany desk, atop which lay a velvet-lined box. Opening it carefully, Adrian revealed another ring identical to Clara's, though slightly tarnished with age. "This belonged to my grandfather," he said softly. "It was meant to match the one he gave Evelyn. A pair." Clara's breath caught in her throat as she stared at the twin rings. For the first time, the full weight of their connection sank in. "They really did love each other," she whispered. "Enough to risk everything." Adrian nodded, his voice thick with emotion. "And now here we are. Two people carrying pieces of their legacy. Maybe it's fate, or maybe it's just the power of stories to bring people together." As the days passed, Clara began to see Adrian's world in a new light. Beyond the opulence and privilege lay a man deeply rooted in his family's history, grappling with questions of identity and purpose. He wasn't the untouchable millionaire she had initially assumed. He was flawed, searching, and profoundly human. Similarly, Adrian discovered layers to Clara he hadn't expected. Her resilience, her wisdom, her ability to find beauty in simplicity. Together they forged a bond that transcended their differences, built on mutual respect and admiration. On Siu, her final night at the estate, Adrian invited Clara to join him on the terrace overlooking the gardens. The air was cool, scented with the faint aroma of blooming jasmine. Stars dotted the sky, casting a gentle glow over the landscape. "I've been thinking," Adrian began, breaking the peaceful silence, "about the ring, about what it means. For you, for me, for our families." Clara turned to face him, her expression thoughtful. "What do you think it means?" "I think it represents choice," Adrian replied. "For my grandfather and Evelyn, it symbolized a love they couldn't fully embrace because of the times they lived in. But for us, it can mean something different. We have the chance to honor their memory without letting it define us." Clara nodded slowly, considering his words. "So what happens now?" Adrian took a deep breath, his gaze steady. "That depends on you. If you want to keep the ring, I understand. It's part of your grandmother's legacy and no one should take that away from you. But if you'd rather return it, to preserve its place in my family's history, I'll respect that too." To his surprise, Clara smiled softly. "You know, when I first met you, I thought the ring was just a trinket, something pretty to wear. But now I realize it's more than that. It's a reminder of hope, of love enduring against all odds. Whether it stays with me or goes back to your family, its meaning won't change." Adrian felt a swell of gratitude wash over him. Then let's make a decision together. Whatever we choose, it'll be because it feels right, not because of obligation or expectation. By the end of her visit, Clara and Adrian had reached a resolution. The ring would remain with Clara, a testament to the courage and love passed down through generations. In return, Clara gifted Adrian a book filled with handwritten notes from her grandmother, fragments of poetry, sketches, and musings that offered glimpses into Evelyn's inner world. It was a gesture of trust, a way of sharing her heritage with him. As they parted ways, promising to stay in touch, both knew their lives had been irrevocably changed. What had begun as a simple act of kindness on a rainy afternoon had evolved into a journey of discovery, one that bridged two worlds, united two families, and opened the door to possibilities neither had dared to dream of. Weeks turned into months, and the bond between Clara and Adrian only grew stronger. Their shared journey to uncover the truth about their intertwined families had transformed them both in ways neither could have anticipated. What started as a mystery surrounding a ring had evolved into something far deeper, a partnership built on trust, respect, and an unspoken understanding of the past's power to shape the future. Adrian found himself returning to Clara's small town more often than he'd expected. At first, it was to follow up on leads or visit the library where they'd spent so many hours piecing together fragments of their grandparents' story. But soon, his visits became less about research and more about simply being near her. The simplicity of her life, the quiet mornings sipping tea by the window, the laughter of children playing in the streets, the warmth of neighbors who treated each other like family, was a stark contrast to the fast-paced, high-stakes world he'd always known. And yet, it felt oddly familiar, as if he'd been searching for this kind of peace all along. Clara, too, began to see Adrian not just as the man who had stumbled into her life with a broken-down car, but as someone who challenged her to look beyond the boundaries of her own existence. He brought stories of cities she'd never visited, cultures she'd only read about, and ideas that sparked her curiosity. Yet he never tried to change her or diminish the beauty of her roots. Instead, he celebrated them, marveling at how much strength and wisdom she carried within her. One crisp spring morning, as cherry blossoms bloomed across the countryside, Adrian arrived at Clara's cottage with a proposition. "I've been thinking," he said, brushing a strand of hair from his face. His tone was casual, but there was a flicker of nervousness in his eyes. "What if we worked together to preserve your town's history? Not just our family's stories, but the entire community's?" Clara tilted her head, intrigued. "What do you mean?" "I mean creating a heritage center," Adrian explained. "A place where people can come to learn about the town's past, the triumphs, the struggles, the everyday moments that make it unique. You've shown me how much this place means to you, and I want to help ensure its legacy lives on." Clara's heart swelled at the idea. She'd always dreamed of finding a way to honor her town's rich history, but resources were limited, and such projects often seemed out of reach. "That sounds incredible," she admitted, "but it's a huge undertaking. Are you sure you're ready for something like this?" Adrian grinned, his confidence returning. "I wouldn't have suggested it if I weren't serious. Besides, I think it'll be good for me too. A chance to step away from my usual work and focus on something meaningful." And so the project began. Together, Adrian and Clara rallied the community, gathering photographs, artifacts, and oral histories from residents eager to share their memories. The old barn on the edge of town, long abandoned and forgotten, was renovated into a vibrant space filled with exhibits celebrating the town's heritage. Clara curated the displays with care, while Adrian used his connections to secure funding and expertise. It wasn't always easy. There were disagreements, logistical challenges, and moments of doubt. But through it all, they leaned on each other, drawing strength from their partnership. As the Heritage Center took shape, so did their relationship. They spent countless hours side by side, laughing over shared meals, debating design choices, and marveling at the stories they uncovered. Slowly but surely, the lines between friendship and something deeper began to blur. One evening, as they sat on the porch of Clara's cottage watching the sunset paint the sky in fiery hues, Adrian finally voiced what had been lingering in his heart. Clara, he began, his voice soft but steady. I know we've been focused on building this center, and it's been amazing, but I need to say something. Being here with you, it's changed me. You've taught me things I didn't even realize I needed to learn. About patience, humility, and finding joy in the little things. Clara smiled, her cheeks flushing slightly. You've changed me, too, she confessed. Before you came into my life, I thought I had everything figured out. But now, I see possibilities I never imagined. Adrian reached for her hand, his touch gentle yet deliberate. Then let's imagine them together. Whatever comes next, for us, for this town, I want to face it with you. Tears welled up in Clara's eyes, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of hope, of gratitude, of love. I'd like that, she whispered. The grand opening of the Heritage Center was a celebration unlike anything the town had ever seen. Residents packed the newly restored barn, marveling at the exhibits that told their collective story. Children ran excitedly from display to display, pointing out familiar faces in old photographs. Elderly patrons reminisced about days gone by, their voices filled with pride and nostalgia. At the center of it all stood Clara and Adrian, holding hands as they welcomed visitors and thanked everyone for their support. During his speech, Adrian addressed the crowd with heartfelt sincerity. This center isn't just about preserving the past, he said. It's about honoring the people who shaped it, their courage, their resilience, their love. And no one embodies those qualities more than Clara Bennett. Without her vision and dedication, none of this would have been possible. The applause that followed was thunderous, but Clara barely heard it. Her gaze was fixed on Adrian, her heart overflowing with emotion. She stepped forward to speak, her voice trembling, but clear. When Adrian first walked into my life, I didn't know what to expect. But he showed me that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can lead to the most extraordinary transformations. This center is proof of that. It's proof that when we come together, we can create something truly beautiful. In the months that followed, Adrian made a decision that surprised even himself. He sold part of his business empire, using the proceeds to invest in revitalizing Clara's hometown. New schools were built, roads were repaired, and local businesses received grants to expand. The once sleepy town began to thrive, attracting visitors eager to experience its charm and history. Through it all, Clara remained at the heart of it, inspiring others with her passion and determination. Their personal lives flourished alongside the town's renewal. Adrian moved into a cozy house near Clara's cottage, embracing the slower pace of rural living. Together, they continued working on projects that benefited the community, always mindful of the lessons they'd learned from their grandparents. Story. Love, they realized, wasn't just about grand gestures or dramatic sacrifices. It was about showing up, day after day, and choosing to build something lasting. On a warm summer evening, as fireflies danced in the twilight and the scent of wildflowers filled the air, Adrian knelt before Clara beneath the ancient oak tree where they often sat. In his hand was a simple gold band engraved with the Caldwell crest, a new ring, crafted to symbolize their future rather than their past. Clara Bennett, he said, his voice thick with emotion. You've given me more than I ever thought possible. Will you spend the rest of your life reminding me of what truly matters? Tears streamed down Clara's face as she nodded, her answer barely audible over the beating of her heart. Yes. As Adrian slipped the ring onto her finger, the same tree that had witnessed generations of love bore witness once again. This time, however, the story wasn't one of loss or regret. It was a tale of redemption, of two people finding each other across time and circumstance, united by a legacy of courage and hope. And so, the ring that had once divided them became a symbol of unity, not just for Clara and Adrian, but for everyone, touched by their journey. In bridging their worlds, they proved that love, when nurtured with care and understanding, could transcend barriers and create a future brighter than either had dared to dream.